Unit 15. Gateway. Norms emerge in groups as a result of people conforming to the behavior of others. Thus, the start of a norm occurs when one person acts in a particular manner in a particular situation because she thinks she ought to. Others may then conform to this behavior for a number of reasons. The person who performed the initial action may think that others ought to behave as she behaves in situations of this sort. Thus, she may prescribe the behavior to them by uttering the norm statement in a prescriptive manner. Alternately, she may communicate that conformity is desired in other ways, such as by gesturing. In addition, she may threaten to sanction them for not behaving as she wishes. This will cause some to conform to her wishes and act as she acts. But some others will not need to have the behavior prescribed to them. They will observe the regularity of behavior and decide on their own that they ought to conform. They may do so for either rational or moral reasons. Exercises. Number 1. Globalization has often been studied as a macro phenomenon. However, as the globalization process obviously affects individuals' lives, a need for alternative concepts has emerged. Concepts such as cosmopolitanism and global citizenship have therefore frequently been used to capture how globalization is experienced from below, with individuals as the object of analysis. Here, cosmopolitanism is interpreted as having many similarities to global citizenship. For instance, cultural sociologist John Tomlinson claims that being a cosmopolitan means that one has an active experience of belonging to the wider world. As such, cosmopolitanism is closely connected to identity. A cosmopolitan obtains a reflexive awareness of the features that unite us as human beings. This requires the ability to question one's own assumptions and prejudices. Identity is in this context not essentialist or stable. Rather, it is fragmented and constructed and reconstructed across the different practices and positions in which one participates. Number 2. On June 17, 1953, Mrs. Roosevelt traveled to Hiroshima, where she visited the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission, an American research group that studied the effects of the nuclear attacks on bomb survivors. Many people had been injured by the fires that the bomb had caused. After her official meetings, some girls were waiting to see her. The girls explained that they did not blame her for the atomic bomb. They only wanted to impress on her the need to ensure that these weapons were never used again on human beings, given their effects. Although she did not say so directly, the girls may have been among those whose faces were permanently disfigured by the attack. This must have been a powerful encounter, because Mrs. Roosevelt called it a tragic moment. It led her to urge Americans to do more to help. Though she maintained that they were not America's direct responsibility, as a gesture of goodwill for the victims of this last war, such help would be invaluable. Number 3. Most philosophers accepted Plato's definition of knowledge as justified true belief until the 1960s, when Edmund Gettier showed that it didn't always provide a satisfactory explanation. He came up with several instances where we instinctively realize that someone doesn't really know something, even though that person's belief is both true and justified. For example, I have arranged to meet my friend Sue at her house, and when I arrive, I see her through the window sitting in the kitchen. In fact, it is not Sue that I see, but her identical twin sister. Sue is actually in another room. My belief that Sue is home is true, and I have good reason to believe it because I am sure I have seen her. But it is wrong to say that I knew she was at home. I didn't know. Examples such as this became known as Gettier problems and have prompted philosophers to ask if, in addition to belief, truth, and justification, there is a fourth criterion for knowledge. Gettier had cast doubt not only on Plato's definition, but also on whether or not it is possible to define completely what knowledge is. Number 4. On one level, it is helpful for individuals to identify which kind of ethical system they have and which kind they admire. Immanuel Kant takes it one step further, adding an unusual rule for a deontologist. He believed that you can and should test your decisions for moral and ethical soundness, and outlined a thought experiment he called the categorical imperative to help you do just that. When considering any course of action, ask yourself, would I want everyone else, if placed in my position, to do the same thing? If the answer is yes, you're on the right path. If the answer is no, then don't do it yourself. For example, when you can easily imagine a situation in which it might be to your advantage to lie, you would not want everyone to lie, so you should not lie yourself. Number 5. Life forms work to evolve survival strategies, but without necessarily being aware of the process. Consciousness is not a necessary condition of life, though it says much about the organism that happens to possess it. Most biological species have evolved techniques and mechanisms for survival without reflecting on the fact, and this is what has happened so far with computer life forms. We can speculate on how computers might ponder on their own survival, but this is essentially a matter for the future. At present, we see a host of rudimentary survival mechanisms in computers. We may expect these to develop and new ones to emerge. It is inevitable. At the present stage of their development, the computer survival strategies owe virtually everything to human involvement in computer design. However, as machine autonomy develops, there will be a progressive reduction in the extent of human influence on computer evolution. Computers will come to think about their own position in the world and take steps to enhance their own security. Number 6. Since at least the late 19th century and the rise of industrial cities, the history of urbanism and urban planning has been a history of expertise, political, administrative, and technocratic. Cities came to be seen as solutions to demands for wealth, health, safety, opportunity, and personal development, as society grew more economically, socially, and politically complex. Cities also came to be seen as posing new problems, often caused by their successes in meeting earlier social demands, both fueled by and fueling that problem/solution framework. The progressive political movement of the early 20th century relied heavily on trained and trusted experts, especially economists and other social scientists. Those experts were often educated in newly formed occupational disciplines and professional schools. Degrees in hand, they were primed to lead both governments and businesses away from the era of laissez-faire and toward better outcomes for themselves and for workers and citizens. That meant safer food, safer water, better working conditions, safer and less expensive automobiles, expanded opportunities for education, leisure, and personal fulfillment, and so on.